1800s, and there's a constant debate over how to describe the human mind and behavior. Wilhelm Wundt was a psychologist and professor and founded the first psychology lab in Germany. This is where the ideas of structuralism were born. Structuralism focused on breaking down the mental processes into more basic concepts. His work helped to establish psychology as a separate science and contribute methods to experimental psychology. But for today's scientific standards, the experimental methods used to study the structure of the mind were too subjective. The use of introspection led to the lack of reliability in results. Introspection is the examination of one's own conscious thoughts and feelings. The process of introspection relies exclusively on the observation of one's mental state. Functionalism also emerged as a reaction to structuralism. Functionalists sought to explain the mental processes in a more systematic and accurate manner. Rather than focusing on the elements of consciousness, functionalists focused on the purpose of consciousness and behavior. Functionalism also emphasized individual differences, which had a profound impact on education. Functionalism did have its strengths. It influenced the education system, especially with regards to John Dewey's belief that children should learn at the level for which they are developmentally prepared. Functionalism was heavily influenced by the theory of evolution. This is where we see the emergence of work by psychologist William James. William James grew up in a poor family and realized that he needed to support himself. At that point in his life, he switched to Harvard Medical School. Unhappy with medicine, he became increasingly interested in psychology when he studied abroad. After he graduated, he became an instructor at Harvard and created the first psychology lab in the United States. Although the concepts are structuralism, introspection, and functionalism, I think it's important we talk about pragmatism. James wrote considerably on the concept of pragmatism. According to it, the truth of an idea can never be proven. James proposed that we instead focus on what he called the cash value, or usefulness of an idea. Now it is time to focus on the similarities between the two men. Although they are usually sought as the father of psychology, they were the first two to create the great schools, or functionalism and structuralism. Their lives overlap. For example, with Wilhelm Wundt born in 1832 and dying in 1920, while William James was born 10 years later and died 10 years earlier. Both have claims to establish the first psychology lab in 1875, and neither named their school. Both men are base scientists whose subject is the human mind consciousness. Neither presumes that cognition is material which can be studied as physical matter. What Wundt calls apperception, James calls consciousness. Both relying on introspection, or looking inward. Lastly, it's important to know that structuralism was Wundt's theory, and William James was an anti-structuralist. His theory was functionalism.